Have you ever had that persistent feeling that something is deeply wrong with this world? That uncomfortable intuition that there's a hidden truth behind all the pain, suffering, and confusion we witness daily? You're right. The reality is more shocking than any conspiracy theory. We weren't created by a loving God, but imprisoned by a cosmic entity known to the Gnostics as the Demiurge. This being, a false god who presents himself as the supreme creator, designed this material world specifically as a prison for our souls. The texts banned from the Bible reveal this forbidden truth. We are divine sparks deliberately imprisoned in physical bodies, our consciousness limited by design, our energy constantly drained through dense emotions like fear, guilt, and forced worship. This knowledge has been brutally suppressed for millennia because it represents the key to our freedom. Ancient civilizations like Atlantis and Lemuria that discovered this truth were systematically destroyed. But now it's time to awaken. This isn't just another theory, it's the revelation that explains why you've always felt there was something more beyond this limited reality. In ancient times, long before modern religions took shape, there existed a profound knowledge about the nature of reality that few today dare to explore. This knowledge, preserved in Gnostic texts and esoteric traditions that were systematically banned from the Bible over the centuries, reveals a disconcerting truth. The architect of this material world is not the supreme creator, but a limited entity known as the Demiurge. Imagine discovering that everything you were taught about the creation of the universe was only a half-truth, carefully controlled to keep you in a state of ignorance. The awakening of this consciousness can be overwhelming, like waking from a deep dream to realize that the walls around you are merely projections. The Demiurge emerged as a result of a fracture in the original divine realm. According to Gnostic teachings, in the beginning there was only the supreme source, the pleroma, the perfect fullness beyond any human comprehension. From this source emanated pure spiritual beings, the aeons. One of these aeons, Sophia, wisdom, driven by curiosity and the desire to create, cast herself beyond the limits of the pleroma without her complementary pair, creating an imbalance. From this action was born the Demiurge, a powerful but incomplete entity that inherited the creative impulse of its origin, but without the full connection to the source. Like a cosmic orphan, the Demiurge believed itself to be the only god, and in its ignorance began to shape the material world we know, thus becoming the god of this physical realm without even knowing of the existence of higher realities. This Demiurge, unlike what conventional religions teach, did not create this world out of unconditional love, but from a self-centered desire to be worshipped and feared. This entity, devoid of complete understanding of the true divine nature, built a cosmic prison so sophisticated that its inhabitants don't even notice the bars surrounding them. Have you ever wondered why there is so much suffering in a world supposedly created by a perfect and loving being? The answer lies in the limitations of the material creator himself. Like a child playing God, he molded an imperfect universe, reflecting his own fragmented nature. Daily, billions of people direct their prayers and energy to this entity, not realizing they are feeding the very system that keeps them captive. The knowledge of Gnosticism, considered dangerous and forbidden knowledge by the guardians of religious dogmas, offers us a liberating perspective. We are not merely sinful creatures needing external salvation, but divine sparks temporarily forgetful of their true origin. The Demiurge, when creating humans, did not expect that we would carry within us a divine essence, fragments of Sophia herself that mixed with the material creation. This is the real reason why we are both part of this physical world and inexplicably drawn to the spiritual. When you begin to investigate the texts that were deliberately excluded from religious canons, a pattern emerges. Any knowledge that empowers the individual to recognize their own innate divinity has been systematically suppressed and labeled as heresy or forbidden knowledge. The material matrix we inhabit was ingeniously designed as a trap for consciousness. Every aspect of this physical world serves as a distraction, keeping our attention fixed on the external, the superficial, driving us away from the inner journey where true liberation can be found. The Demiurge established his dominion over Earth. By instituting limiting natural laws, and creating hierarchies of beings, the archons, that help administer this cosmic prison. Observe how modern society has intensified this process, constantly bombarding us with stimuli, urgencies, and concerns that keep our vital energy dispersed. The awakening of consciousness begins when you recognize these control mechanisms and begin to direct your attention inward. The most effective prison is one where prisoners not only ignore that they are incarcerated, but defensively attack anyone who suggests their condition as captives. This is the true genius of the Demiurge, creating a system where prisoners voluntarily defend and maintain their own prison. The predominant narrative in virtually all traditional religions tells us a comforting story. The world was created by a loving, perfect, and benevolent God. This is the fable that has cradled humanity for millennia. Yet, when observing the world around us, filled with pain, injustice, suffering, and chaos, a fundamental contradiction emerges. How could a perfect and completely loving being create such a fundamentally flawed system? The answer we're usually offered involves concepts like tests of faith, free will, or divine mysteries. But what if the truth were much simpler and simultaneously more disturbing? What if this world wasn't created out of love, but as an elaborate control mechanism? Gnosticism, that forbidden knowledge that was systematically banned from the Bible, presents exactly this perspective. A vision that challenges everything we've been conditioned to believe. When we understand the true motive of creation through the lens of Gnostic knowledge, we realize that this material world essentially functions as an energy farm. The Demiurge, in his limited and needy nature, requires the energy generated by conscious beings to maintain his power. Unlike the supreme source, which is complete in itself, this false god depends on the worship, fear, and submission of his creations to sustain his existence. Observe how traditional religious structures emphasize rituals of submission, sacrifice, and constant worship. It's no coincidence that most religious doctrines present a God who constantly demands proofs of devotion and threatens severe punishments for those who disobey. This is the dynamic of an abusive relationship on a cosmic scale, an insecure entity demanding constant validation from beings that it created in a state of dependence. The awakening of consciousness begins when we recognize this dysfunctional pattern and start questioning its legitimacy. The true nature of this control system becomes evident when we compare creation based on control, Demiurge, with creation based on true love, the supreme source. The genuine source, the true divine principle, operates through expansion, freedom, and authentic expression. There's no fear, no threats, no conditions, just the constant flow of creative possibilities. Think about how you feel when you're in a state of unconditional love, expansive, connected, fearless. Now compare that with the emotional state promoted by dominant religious institutions: smallness, sin, need for salvation, constant fear of judgment. This discrepancy is not accidental. It's the direct result of a system designed to keep souls in a state of submission. The cosmic prison doesn't have physical walls because it was built with something much stronger: deeply rooted limiting beliefs that act as invisible shackles for consciousness awakening. The ingenious design of this control system includes a particularly effective feature: the illusion of choice and free will within carefully controlled parameters. Like prisoners who can choose between different activities within the prison walls, we are led to believe we are free because we can make limited choices within the system. This is the true mastery of the Demiurge, creating a labyrinth so complex that we confuse the act of navigating between predetermined corridors with genuine freedom. In your daily life, you can observe how this principle operates. We are encouraged to make choices that don't fundamentally threaten the control structure. You can choose different careers, partners, places to live, but try to truly question or completely exit the established paradigms, and you'll quickly encounter systematic resistance. Awakening requires courage because it demands that we face not only the external system, but also the aspects of this system that we've internalized as unquestionable truths. The most revealing comparison between creation based on control and creation based on genuine love is in the fruits that each produces. A system created by true love would naturally generate well-being, harmony, and constant evolution for all beings. There would be no need for fear, guilt, or concepts like sin and eternal punishment. Observe how in nature, when not deformed by human intervention, there exists a dynamic balance. Natural systems tend toward homeostasis and harmonious functioning. However, our world seems structurally inclined toward imbalance and conflict. This is not a flaw in the design. It's the design working exactly as planned. A system that generates conflict, separation, and suffering produces exactly the kind of low-frequency energy that feeds the Demiurge. Each war, each religious or ideological division, each tribal identity that pits us against the others reinforces the walls of this prison and strengthens its architect. The true revolution begins not with external struggle, but with the internal refusal to participate in this game rigged from the start. When you awaken to this truth, you begin to understand why Gnostic knowledge has been so fiercely suppressed throughout history, because a prisoner who understands the nature of their prison is already halfway to freedom. The story of the human soul's fall is perhaps the greatest existential mystery we face, though we rarely recognize it as such. In Gnostic traditions and various texts that were banned from the Bible, we find a narrative quite different from that presented by conventional religions. Originally, we were beings of pure light and consciousness, direct extensions of the Supreme Source, existing in a state of fullness beyond the limited comprehension of our current minds. Imagine an existence without the restrictions of linear time, without the weight of matter, without the limitations of sensory perception that now define our reality. This was our original nature, not sinful creatures needing redemption, but divine beings of pure creative potential. The process by which these divine sparks were gradually imprisoned in physical bodies was not a sudden event, but an ingenious cosmic seduction. Like a spider patiently weaving its web, the Demiurge created a material universe so fascinating and hypnotic that souls were attracted to it, initially out of curiosity, then becoming increasingly dense and entangled until completely forgetting their origin. The physical body, often celebrated as a divine gift, can be more precisely understood as sophisticated limitation technology. It's no coincidence that we frequently feel disconnected or experience an inexplicable nostalgia for something we can't even name. That's the soul's cellular memory remembering its true nature. Observe how consciousness, when imprisoned in the body, becomes drastically limited. We are restricted to a linear perception of time, a singular spatial perspective, and an extremely limited set of sensory frequencies. The human body, though wonderful in many ways, effectively functions as a reducing filter that allows us to experience only a tiny fraction of multidimensional reality. It's like trying to understand the entire ocean by looking through a straw. This prison of flesh was designed with a specific vulnerability to low-frequency vibrations, emotions like fear, shame, and guilt that keep the soul cage firmly locked. Manipulation, through dense emotions, represents the security system of this cosmic prison. The Demiurge, understanding that he couldn't simply forcibly imprison beings of divine nature, implemented a much more subtle and effective system: emotional control. Fear in all its manifestations is the main tool of this system. From the primal fear of physical death to more sophisticated social fears like rejection and inadequacy, these emotions act as heavy energetic chains that keep the soul anchored in material density. Guilt and shame function as complementary mechanisms, creating a psychological labyrinth from which few people manage to escape completely. To understand this in practice, reflect on how many of your daily decisions are motivated, even subtly, by some form of fear or desire to avoid guilt. For most people, the honest answer would be almost all. This is the perverse genius of the system. We don't need external guards when we've perfectly internalized the guardian. But the Demiurge's true tour de force was the creation of social and religious systems that constantly reinforce this control structure. Dogmatic religions were ingeniously designed to keep humans in a perpetual state of fearful devotion to an external authority. Observe how virtually all dominant religions share certain fundamental elements: the notion that we are inherently imperfect or sinful, The need for intermediaries, priests' sacred books between us and the divine, rituals of submission and confession, and the constant threat of some form of punishment for the disobedient. This is not an accidental cultural pattern, but a deliberately implemented control technology. Political, educational, and economic systems function similarly, reinforcing power hierarchies, competition instead of cooperation, and the fundamental belief that some beings are inherently more valuable than others. The forbidden knowledge that challenges this structure is systematically ridiculed, suppressed, or reinterpreted until it becomes harmless. Understanding this imprisonment mechanism, however, contains within itself the seed of liberation. The first step to escaping any prison is recognizing that you're trapped. When we begin to consciously observe how these dense emotions and control systems operate in our lives, we've already initiated the process of reclaiming our spiritual sovereignty. Techniques such as meditation, self-observation, and consistent questioning of inherited beliefs function as liberation tools because they allow us to create a space between our conscious essence and automated emotional patterns. Start paying attention to situations where you feel fear, guilt, or shame, not to repress them, but to observe them with curiosity. Where do these feelings come from? Who benefits when you operate from them? What decisions would you make if you were completely free from these limiting emotions? The simple act of questioning already begins to loosen the chains of the cosmic prison, and when a sufficient number of souls awakens to this truth, the very structure of reality begins to reveal its flaws, opening possibilities for collective consciousness, awakening that transcends the Demiurge's control matrix. The official history of humanity, that taught in schools and preserved in academic books, represents only a tiny fraction of the true saga of our species. Behind this carefully edited narrative, there exists a consistent pattern of civilizations that achieved extraordinary levels of spiritual and technological knowledge, only to be mysteriously erased from collective memory. These were not random extinctions, but calculated interventions whenever a culture came dangerously close to a truth that could free human consciousness from the cosmic prison. The forbidden knowledge about Atlantis, for example, goes far beyond legends of a sunken island. In reality, the Atlantean civilization had developed a perfect synthesis between advanced technology and deep spiritual understanding, allowing them to manipulate the very energy matrix that sustains our reality. They not only understood the illusory nature of the material world created by the Demiurge, but had developed systematic methods to collectively transcend it, thus threatening the entire control system. Lemuria, another civilization often dismissed, as mere mythology, represents perhaps the most profound example of a society built in complete opposition to the Demiurge's values. While we live in a world that celebrates hierarchy, competition, and separation, the Lemurians cultivated a collective consciousness based on absolute cooperation and telepathic interconnection. Unlike our current society, where information is controlled, compartmentalized, and often distorted, in Lemurian culture, knowledge flowed freely among all members, without distortions or manipulations. This created such a powerful consciousness awakening field that it threatened to awaken other souls still trapped in the illusion. The natural catastrophe that supposedly destroyed Lemuria can be more precisely understood as a deliberate intervention to prevent this awakening frequency from spreading across the planet, destabilizing the entire control system architected by the false god of this world. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah, distorted in religious narratives as examples of moral depravity, represents another flagrant case of historical manipulation. These cities had actually developed cultures that completely rejected worship of the Demiurge, recognizing him as the imposter he truly is. The inhabitants of these cities had awakened to the understanding that sexual energy, one of the most powerful forces available to humans, could be used not just for procreation, but as a spiritual technology to break through the veil of material illusion. Contrary to conventional religious narrative, these communities weren't destroyed for immorality, but precisely because they were awakening to an understanding of the body and vital energy that threatened the entire control paradigm. The so-called divine destruction of these cities was actually a brutal demonstration of force to prevent this forbidden knowledge from spreading, followed by a defamation campaign that transformed their liberation into a cautionary tale for future generations. The pattern of suppression and distortion isn't limited to just ancient civilizations. Even in more recent times, we can observe how spiritual movements that bring humans closer to their innate divine potential are systematically infiltrated, corrupted, or attacked. Consider how virtually all the great spiritual masters who have ever lived had their original teachings distorted after their death, transformed into rigid dogmas that often promote exactly the opposite of what they taught. Jesus, for example, spoke about the kingdom of heaven within each person and demonstrated powers that we all could manifest, but his teachings were converted into a religion of external authority and conditional salvation. Buddha taught liberation from mental conditioning, but many Buddhist traditions later calcified into rigid systems of hierarchy and ritual. This is not an accidental process, but a systematic reappropriation of any knowledge that threatens to expose the true nature of our reality as a cosmic prison. The key to understanding these interventions lies in recognizing that we're not just facing human forces, but an intelligence operating beyond the physical veil. The archons, as described in Gnostic texts banned from the Bible, are the guardians of this control matrix, non-physical entities that work to keep humanity in a state of confusion and separation. Whenever a culture or movement approaches a genuine collective awakening, these forces intervene, sometimes through natural catastrophes, other times through seemingly senseless wars or social conflicts. The pattern is always the same: divide, confuse, and, if necessary, completely destroy any threat to the system. Ironically, these interventions are often presented as divine punishment or collective karma, when in fact they represent the opposite: the active suppression of our spiritual evolution by forces that benefit from our ignorance. The good news in all this is that, despite millennia of suppression, the essential knowledge for our liberation continues to resurface in different forms, waiting for us to be ready to recognize it and finally complete the work that these ancient civilizations began: the complete awakening and liberation of human consciousness from the Demiurge's control. After understanding the true nature of our reality, an ingeniously designed cosmic prison, the most important question arises: how do we escape? How do we untie the chains that keep our consciousness asleep? The answer, ironically, isn't in some distant place or in complex esoteric knowledge, but within each of us. The same divine spark that the Demiurge tried to imprison contains within itself the power to transcend the entire control matrix. This isn't a battle that can be won with brute force or external resistance. It's a subtle transformation that occurs first internally, then manifesting in external reality. The process of consciousness awakening begins with a simple recognition. You are not the physical body, nor the thoughts nor the emotions you experience. These are just the outermost layers of your being, like temporary clothes your eternal essence is wearing in this earthly experience. When you can create a space of observation between your consciousness and these temporary aspects, the first crack in the cosmic prison appears. Genuine self-knowledge represents the most powerful tool against the Demiurge's control system. Not the superficial self-knowledge promoted by modern psychology, but a deep investigation that questions every belief, every automatic reaction, every identity you've assumed as being you. Ask yourself sincerely, how many of your fundamental beliefs were really consciously chosen? And how many were simply absorbed from your environment, family, culture, religious institutions? Who would you be if you could completely free yourself from all these programs? This questioning isn't an intellectual exercise, but a daily practice of deconstructing everything that doesn't resonate with your inner truth. Try being fully present with a negative emotion like fear or anger, without judging it or trying to change it, just observing it with curiosity. You'll notice that, under conscious observation, these dense emotions begin to lose their power over you, a clear indication that they were control tools, not inevitable aspects of the human experience. Daily, practice recognizing the moments when you act out of fear, shame, or guilt. And ask yourself, what choice would I make if I were completely free? The inner search represents the direct antidote to the external system of validation and control established by the Demiurge. In a world that constantly teaches us to seek answers, approval and meaning outside ourselves, the simple act of turning your attention inward already represents a revolutionary act. Establish a daily practice of inner silence, whether through formal meditation, walks in nature, or simply moments of conscious pause during your day. In this space of quietude, free from the constant distractions of the modern world, you can begin to discern between the voice of conditioning, the prison, the program, and your genuine intuition, your connection to the Supreme Source. A particularly powerful practice is to question the authority of any external source that demands your submission or positions itself as an intermediary between you and the divine. Reclaim your power from all institutions, sacred books, gurus, or authority figures who claim to have more right to spiritual truth than your own direct experience. The forbidden knowledge that was systematically banned from the Bible contained precisely this message. Divinity isn't in some distant heaven, but within each human being, waiting to be recognized. Direct connection with the Supreme Source, not mediated by religious institutions or authority figures, represents the true threat to the Demiurge's control. When you understand that you can directly access universal wisdom without need for external interpretations or permissions, the entire hierarchical system begins to crumble. This connection doesn't require elaborate rituals or complex esoteric knowledge, just sincere intention and constant practice of tuning into higher frequencies of consciousness. Try this simple practice. For a few minutes daily, sit in silence and visualize yourself as a receiver and transmitter of light, connected directly to the original source of all consciousness. Don't ask for anything specific. Just remain open to receiving the truth that resonates with your deepest being. Over time, you'll begin to clearly distinguish between information that comes from this genuine source, characterized by clarity, expansion, and unconditional love, and that which comes from the control system, characterized by fear, separation, and limitation. This capacity for discernment is what mystics of all traditions have sought to develop, and represents the key to navigating out of the artificial matrix of the false god of this world. In the end, spiritual freedom isn't something that can be given or taught. It's an awakening that each soul must realize for itself. However, there is a powerful phenomenon that occurs when awakened individuals gather with conscious intention. A resonance field forms, exponentially amplifying the awakening process for everyone involved. This is why the Demiurge works tirelessly, to keep humans divided, distracted, and distrustful of each other. Find other truth seekers, not to form new cults or follow new gurus, but to create spaces for genuine exploration and mutual support on the path of awakening. Share your experiences, collectively question the control structures, and remain vigilant against the human tendency to create new hierarchies and dogmas. Always remember, you are not a creation of fear. You are the light that fear tried to extinguish, and it's time to ignite it again. This divine spark within you, once fully recognized and expressed, has the power to inspire countless others to awaken, creating a chain reaction of consciousness that not even the most elaborate control system can contain. The true purpose of human life isn't to survive in a cosmic prison, but to completely transcend it, remembering who you really are. Not a servant of the Demiurge, but a direct and sovereign expression of the supreme source of all existence. What will you do with this forbidden knowledge you've just received? The truth about the Demiurge, this cosmic prison we inhabit, and our true divine nature, isn't just information for passive contemplation. It's a call to action. Today, you can begin breaking the invisible chains by observing which emotions control your decisions. When do you act out of fear? When do you bow to guilt? When do you seek external validation instead of trusting your inner light? Each moment of awareness is a small revolution against the control system. Imagine what it would be like to live completely free from these manipulations, reconnected to your divine essence, navigating life with sovereign power instead of unconscious servitude. This isn't a journey you need to make alone. Others are, awakening en masse at this crucial moment in human history. Will you continue sleeping in the comfortable matrix of illusion, or will you have the courage to awaken to your true nature? The decision is exclusively yours, and it's the only one that really matters. If this knowledge resonated with you, activate notifications now and subscribe to the channel to continue your awakening journey. There is much more forbidden knowledge to be revealed, truths that will completely transform your understanding of who you are and what your true potential is in this universe.